Hello, and welcome to this Sport Radar Connects panel. Firstly, please allow me to introduce myself. I'm Adam Azor. I'm the Executive Vice President, Global Marketing at Sport Radar. And I will be your moderator for today's panel, which is how to score big with paid social. And this is a great conversation to be having and to get into. And in order to do this topic justice, we have assembled an all-star panel of experts, the MVPs, if you will, of social media, who each bring real deep social media experience, along with real category knowledge and insight. So without further ado, we're going to meet our panel, and we're going to find out name, where you're from, a bit of your experience in social, and we're going to find out what is your favourite social media channel or account to follow. So we're going to really learn a little bit more about who we actually have on our panel today. So while you're thinking about that answer, I'll start. My favourite one is First We Feast, which is the Hot Ones channel on YouTube. Some of you may see it or be familiar with the memes. Why I love it is actually it's the concept, which is when celebrities are interviewed, normally they're quite guarded, but when you're eating extremely spicy chicken wings or vegan replacements, you're a little bit more truthful dealing with the questions. So maybe that's something we're going to use for Sport Radar Connect in the future when we start getting people to answer the questions. So, starting from my left, please start with your name, where you're from, and a little bit about your social.
Yeah, thank you. My name's Ross Hartnett. I work at Snapchat. I'm the US Real Money Gaming Sales Manager. I've been working at Snapchat around 7 years now, so it's been quite a while. Seen a lot of ups and downs and good things, but I previously was working across like all verticals, but I've been specifically focusing on real money gaming since 2018. So, and I'm from Ireland originally, as you might be able to tell. Been living in New York 11 years, and my favorite channel, and like it is because it's that time of the year with NFL coming back, and we have a great NFL partnership on Snapchat. So, really just watching a lot of the NFL content through kind of that, as well as like, you know, a lot of ESPN. We have a huge ESPN partnership and a lot of great content there. So really just getting back into it, you know, won my first fantasy game. So I'm ready to go.
But you did have Aaron Rodgers.
Right? I did have Aaron Rodgers, and I still won.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jessica Lee, and I'm the Brand Strategy Director at FanDuel Casino. Relatively new to the industry. I joined early January of this year, but I like to say the team's grown, the industry moves fast. It really does feel like dog years here, but in the best way. Prior to FanDuel, I worked my whole career in marketing, specifically brand management and brand strategy. So I've worked in the alcohol and beverage space, specifically leading big beer brands like Bud Light, Budweiser. Then kind of went to the flip side of the spectrum and was at a Series B startup in women's digital healthcare. So really the company was called The Pill Club, a new-to-world brand, contraception delivery. And the last question was my favorite social. So I'm on social a lot. I think it changes every week what I am most excited by. But right now, fascinated by Ryanair. They're a budget European airline. Go check out their social. Over 2 million on TikTok, 1 million on IG. I think brands that really understand, you know, why customers come to them do really well on social. So Ryanair knows people come to them for the cheap flights, not for the quality service. And you'll see they're a little bit of a troll on the internet. They'll clap back at any customers who tweet at them about late flights or, you know, getting to have to pay extra fees or whatever it may be. They clap right back, and a lot of their content has gone viral.
Nice. Joe Peel, client partner at Meta. Supporting RMG and some of our top RMG operators. I've been with Meta for just under 7 years, but on the RMG team for about 1.5 to 2 years now. And prior to that, I was working on the enterprise e-commerce team supporting some of the larger kind of e-commerce performance marketers like Wayfair and others. And prior to that, I'd spent 10 plus years in the ad tech startup and marketing space. So Nanigans most recently, if that name rings a bell, one of the larger Facebook marketing partners. Prior to joining Facebook, working with e-commerce and gaming. So from New York, born and raised just outside the city in Westchester. So bad weekend for Giants football, but I don't know, may have been worse for the Jets last night, despite the win. And favorite social, so obviously biased. Oh yeah, I wanted to thank Sports Radar for inviting me, but also thanking for putting Jess between Ross and myself, since it can get quite hostile. Just kidding. But no, favorite is Zyre Golf on Instagram. It makes me feel better about my crappy golf game. So it's by far the handle I share the most with my friends who we play with quite often.
Good.
Hey everyone, Brendan Tinley, head of paid social at Sportradar for the last 2 years. My job is basically to represent clients like FanDuel to platforms like Meta and Snap. Prior to that, I also spent 7 years at Meta, mostly in the gambling space as well. So I think 9 years now working in gambling ads, I've kind of seen it all. Prior to that, I worked in the kind of video game space, so working with brands like Call of Duty, PlayStation, and so on, as they were kind of building their brands on paid social as well. Favorites, I'm not allowed to apparently tell you my favorite paid social or social media account. Adam has censored that one. So my second favorite is a Twitter account called Perfume Ads for Sale. Don't know if any of you guys know this account, but just this basically generates these ideas for perfume ads, which, as you know, are quite weird often. So it'll be David Beckham playing bagpipes in a field, and then a watermelon explodes in slow motion. So it's worth checking out.
All of those sound better than any perfume advertisement I think I've ever seen. So I'm generally delighted to be hosting today's panel on social media, and especially with the speakers that we have assembled for it. For me, social media over the last decade has been one of the most effective marketing channels in regard to campaign performance. And I've been running campaigns on social media from around 2008. In that era, it was a bit like the Wild West. The algorithms were a little bit more generous in that time, especially on organic. Maybe that's something you can chat with Ross and Joe later. But I was working on social media marketing for brands such as Coca-Cola, Molson Coors, and Diageo. And alcohol brands have always been very interesting when it comes to social, especially given the restrictions around marketing, which I think is a very interesting parallel for sports betting. But alcohol brands were one of the earliest to capitalize on the opportunity of paid social. And in many ways, they still lead the way where it comes to creativity and performance. But I want to actually start with a question to the audience. So let's test and see if the caffeine is kicked in, how awake everyone is. And I'm going to ask the question, how many of you here have a personal social media account? This includes LinkedIn. If you do, please raise your hand. Right, please keep your hand raised if you post regularly on social media on this account. Okay, this is about 75, you can put your hands down now, thank you. This is about at least 75% of the audience. This is a really large number and it's really unique. And this is unique in marketing because you're all content creators of various scale. But this is a very unique point to the discipline of social media. And it's this uniqueness that will really drive some of the themes that we're going to get into today. Because for all of its notoriety, and I'm not just talking about marketing, even in popular culture, social media is still arguably one of the most undervalued and to a certain extent underappreciated marketing disciplines when it comes to effectiveness. And this is an effectiveness that's only going to accelerate with the advancements of artificial intelligence, with machine learning, which is really going to power that next evolution of social. And it's this combination of performance, technology, and brand building, which is really going to kind of power the conversation that we're going to get into today. So, on to the first question. When it comes to integrated marketing campaigns, can you talk to me about why social media should be an essential part of the marketing mix? And Jess, as our referee, we're going to start with you.
Yeah. So I mentioned I've been cross-industry, and every campaign I've ever launched, paid social is definitely a very essential part of the mix. And I think the short answer is it works, right? You kind of mentioned this as well. It's a performance-driven channel, so we can launch creative really quickly, test and learn, and also pivot really quickly if we need meet you. You saw everybody's hands raised as well today, right? As a good brand person, we need to meet our customers where they are. I reckon every person here today has been on social at least twice, or more than that if I'm speaking about myself. So really just the ability to have that custom one-on-one interaction, to be super targeted and deliver custom creative is one of the many, many reasons why it needs to be an important part of our mix.
Yeah, I think to add on to Jess's point, I love the phrase "meet the customers where they are." You think about mobile devices and kind of the access you have to them at all times. It's no longer just the second device. When you are in that living room that we were talking about earlier, oftentimes now it's the first device. It's where they are, regardless if they're in transition, they're traveling, they're in the car, plane, subway. Right, we do it every day. They're constantly checking these various platforms. Meta, Snap, TikTok, all of the above. So meeting them where they are is crucial, and you can get the scale on these platforms that you can't get elsewhere.
I think you've both kind of nailed it, right? I mean, Jess, you talked about this one-to-one, ability to target and be relevant at a personal level, but then you also talk about the scale, right? So you have this mass scale that you get when you buy that TV ad, during the Super Bowl. You get that on Facebook every single day, but you also get to be super personalized and relevant in a very, immediate way with every individual, right?
Yeah, I think as well, like every platform, we're all pretty unduplicated with like different users that are accessing it every single day. So like kind of like, tapping into all different mediums and like building a frequency with a user is really one of the key metrics that I think is kind of often overlooked is like, oh, are we getting our, CAC acquisition targets? Are we hitting our goals? But it's like, if you're not actually driving that frequent message with somebody, it's like, how's that message actually going to land and stick with them? There's so many touch points and so much clutter throughout the day. And like to Jess's point, like creative is going to be always king for like getting that user to convert. Like, are you giving them an action, or like, are you kind of like connecting with them personally? And I think like the fun thing with like what Snap has, and I hope you all get to try out the AR mirror we have there with partner with Sportsradar and the data, but like just being able to like give people experiences that like they don't generally get elsewhere, it's very engaged when you're kind of leaning in and playing with augmented reality. We see people spend over 10 seconds plus like playing with these units. Like, getting somebody to watch a 10-second ad is like extremely challenging. So I think, all these new mediums that are evolving as well is something that's like really exciting. And I think as we get into later in the panel, like how that like corresponds then with artificial intelligence.
That's actually a nice segue, Ross, into that second point, which is around how can social media be used effectively to raise brand awareness, but also brand affinity? And what are those unique ways that social can be used to promote fan engagement and loyalty? You touched on some of that, but I wonder if you could expand on that a little bit more.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think like the most important thing that I think when industry players come to like us, where they kind of have their persona of like, here's who we are, here's how we see ourselves, but they kind of have to reverse the script and see it like we're talking to an audience and we need to know on this platform how we need to speak to that audience. And that's the way you really build that awareness and affinity, is by like appealing to them in that regard. So being able to like, as I said, really think about the different types of ad units that are available on like the different platforms. With Snap, we really think about like the difference between like, viewability versus scale, where with viewability, we know with AR, people are like really leaned in playing with that. We have our like non-skip commercials, which is like all full screen ad units, where we really see, those ad products really drive huge like frequency as well as like huge resonance metrics. And like we've done this across many clients with like brand lift studies, and we've just seen like, if we can hit that 3 frequency a week with these units, like, their awareness shoots up. Especially for some of the more emerging operators, I think that's like an area that's like a huge focus.
Joe, we've talked there about Snap. Talk to us about Meta then. Go on, give us the counter.
No, those are all great points. I mean, I would plus one to all of those. I think one thing, in the previous panel mentioned it earlier, which I really love, is thinking about it from a consumer standpoint, not just us being platform or marketers. It's, a consumer doesn't see an ad in feed or wherever you are as a brand ad or a performance ad. They just see an ad. So I think it's important to call out when you're trying to drive affinity and engagement and loyalty. It's having a diverse portfolio of both kind of traditional brand, video assets, but also having a good mix of kind of more consideration, engaging fun things, like encourage you all to play more, do things with polls, AR ads, which we unfortunately don't support, but Snap has a great product there, but polls, questions, things on Instagram like that, that drive that kind of time spent in engagement and nurture them down the funnel, and let some of the automation tools like dynamic ads really drive the performance, right? So having a full kind of portfolio and balanced kind of approach to that investment will drive the affinity, drive the performance that your media buyers need to hit, and hopefully drive loyalty in the long term.
I think that those interactive formats are a really interesting challenge for brands, right? Because on social you can really bring your brand to life in a way that you can't on a typical TV ad, maybe not some of these new CTV ads. There's a lot more you can do, but I think also it's a challenge to get those ads built and to understand the potential of these channels and make sure that your creative teams do as well. So I think that's one of the big things. I think the other challenge brands have when it comes to building awareness and building affinity on paid social, I think Ryanair is actually a great example. Like, you want to be native to the platform, you want to respect that this is where people come for entertainment and information and for organic experiences. You want to get up to that line, but you also still want to preserve your commercial message and your brand. I think that's something a lot of brands struggle with, either being just super commercial or being super organic and actually forgetting that they're advertising, right?
Yeah, and one thing to add too that I wanted to mention is enlist others who have really strong communities with a loyal following. So, we don't have an explicit, topic or discussion today on influencers or creators, but certainly tap into that community, and especially on the sports side, really loyal fans to a fault probably, and I'm guilty of that as well. But tap into these influencers who have really loyal, communities and let them kind of tell your story for you and build that trust and credibility. Kind of goes a long way rather than just always hearing it from the brand directly.
Let's pivot to the next question around challenges. And Brendan, you mentioned it in your previous point there, but what are the common challenges to consider when developing paid social strategies in this industry? And Jess, this is probably a great one for you to kick off and your perspective.
Yeah, Brendan teed me up quite well. I would say, bespoke creative is always going to be a challenge. There's paid social as a channel, but within platforms, they all behave differently. And the more bespoke and specific we can get, the better the message will resonate. And I think, coming from a world where we built these huge 360 splashy brand campaigns, oftentimes the creative comes to us in the form of TV scripts, and we're like, this is the territory we want to go, this is the creative idea. And then a couple weeks goes by and we're like, oh shit, how does this look on social and digital, right? And we all know that that's kind of a no-no, and I think we're getting better and better with every campaign to not operate that way, but it's hard to break that habit with so many channels to focus on, right? So I think a good example is this last summer where we launched Winner Winner Chicken Dinner. Brendan and Sportradar are a key partner in that. So this was a campaign where FanDuel Casino wanted to own that phrase, really relevant to casino. And we were giving out free chicken dinners to players one a week to really celebrate them and celebrate the feeling of winning. So it's a little bit of a cheeky campaign, and we had these really hilarious TV ads showing philosophical chickens debating the meaning of life, tongue-in-cheek type of content. But that sort of long-form narrative doesn't translate well when I'm looking at Facebook, Instagram, whatever it may be. So really relying on partners like our internal paid social team and Sportradar to translate, like, how do we make sure the joke lands within this first 6 seconds, the brand lands within the first 6 seconds. All those details, I think is really important as we move forward and get better and better with our creative.
Are people in the audience familiar with this chicken dinner campaign? It's fucking amazing.
Some head nods.
Well done.
I love it. I remember when I first got the assets, my first reaction was, this is brilliant, because it's so different to every other online casino ad. Just, here's $1,000 bet now. This was about chickens talking philosophically about what happens when they die, and talking about, are you religious, like stuff that's just totally off the wall. My second reaction was, shit, these assets aren't going to work at all. So it is like, there was a great partnership there, I think, like to get the assets turned around in a way that could tell the story, land the message, but do it in a very different way. And what I really like about it is like that was one of those real big ideas from a creative agency, right? Like, Jess, you guys even opened a chicken restaurant in Philadelphia,
yeah,
right? I mean, like, you don't see that from a typical online casino. So really, really amazing. But what I liked as well, there was the agility and the flexibility to bring it down into these platform native formats. So for example, with Meta, we did like a an event where people got RSVP to the restaurant opening. With Snap, you could get turn-by-turn directions to go to the restaurant to get your free chicken. So they were doing it in kind of native, interactive, kind of community-focused ways. I think really helped elevate it.
Yeah, you talk about creative in the production and getting edits and cuts after the fact, and happens more often than not. But it doesn't have to always be hi-fi kind of produced TV assets that are cut and edited for social. And again, play more is kind of something we talk about internally. It's like use these lo-fi, UGC, influencer type, whether it's coming from their handle or yours, and just test and experiment. I think that's one of the things that we've seen, or I've seen personally too, is some of the best or more successful marketing orgs are ones that have kind of dedicated experimental, be it budgets or teams or personnel, to kind of go outside the box, experiment, and don't hold them accountable to the same KPIs that, be it brand or lower funnel kind of CAC targets. Because that test, learn, iterate is the process that you'll find new winning assets and strategies longer term.
You all touched upon certain themes there which kind of link into artificial intelligence, machine learning, and I think this is the topic of now, right? We talked about it earlier. This is a really interesting space, especially with social. So when it comes to artificial intelligence, automation in advertising for betting and gaming, what are your thoughts on how this technology should be applied and what areas should have the human creative applied? And then, Brendan, maybe you can kick this conversation off.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, the last year's hype around AI. And like we've all seen it as consumers, I guess, with ChatGPT as like one of those real mind-blowing technologies, I think, that don't come along too often. And the truth is, I mean, you look at Meta and Snap as well, AI has been powering a lot of their ads product for a long time. They've got data centers bigger than my town powering their algorithms, right? And they just didn't really talk about it, right? So there's all these amazing, clever digital deep learning models and all this stuff that's powering automation and optimization of the platform for years. And I saw that during my time at Meta. When I started, the most sophisticated clients had a team of 10, 20 UA buyers doing incredibly complex manual media buying work and segmentation and bidding adjustments. I mean, Nanigans were kind of leaders in this space as well. And then what happened is, as Meta deployed more of this AI technology, it just completely automated media buying. So really the media buying challenge on paid social kind of solved now already by AI, right? I think that's great, and it makes everyone's life easier because no one gets up out of bed in the morning to buy or to optimize campaigns and ads manager. It's not a fun job. I think what's interesting now in the last year is that AI is now coming for the fun stuff as well. It's coming for creative, and it's coming for these things. And that's where there's a lot of risk, particularly for an industry like ours. I mean, a great example, so I was in Ads Manager a couple of days ago, and I was setting up a ad for a casino client, and you put in the ad copy and whatever. And Meta has this new feature now that suggests other ad copy variations. I was like, oh, win big when you play with this casino brand. So, well, you can't suggest that's a way to financial success. So, the AI isn't yet up to speed with the compliance obligations. And I think that's kind of the challenge we have. We're always going to have that human in the loop, right?
Yeah, our industry may be a laggard on that in terms of vertical adoption. But to your point, Brendan, I mean, Meta's invested in AI for years, and as consumers, you may not notice or feel it, but all the feed-driven products, right? And even some of our AI kind of discovery-based engines now that we've talked about publicly in earnings and things, they're yielding positive results. I think the last earnings we announced like plus 10% time spent or engagement in Facebook feed just because of a new AI model. So like we're already engaging and seeing these things, but from a utility standpoint, from an advertiser, or even on the sales side at Meta, we're seeing kind of these large language model type bots or kind of text-based tools that you can use to make yourself more efficient in your work and give time back to kind of some more of that strategic thinking or experimentation that is really going to move the needle long term. So I think right now it's going to be a productivity and efficiency play that can be used by both marketers and publishers and platforms.
Yeah, I definitely think like the AI word is the buzzword, but it's kind of existed in the background. But I think ever since like ChatGPT release, it's like it is here. So it's just like it's still the first innings of this new AI, I feel. that we're all just like trying to like see actually where it's going to go. But like, it's like exponential of like how things are changing. Like, you know, you can take pivot or you can take Excel spreadsheets and like push it into the system and just tell it exactly what you want. Like, you know, people who are just buying brand or like user acquisition ads are now able to be their own analysts and be able to like unleash like different, you know, talents that they might not have built with like pivot tables or like SAS or anything like that. Now they can kind of get into this data and like get the answers that they want. And I think like one thing that's really interesting for us at Snap is kind of back to like the augmented reality. Like we built millions and millions of like AR lens experiences. It's only a matter of time before we're going to be able to like, you know, be able to like input anything you want, you know, turn my head into a potato or something like that. But, you know, all of that is like going to be, you know, be happening very, very soon. And like as Brendan said, like for some of those units, like there's a lot of friction to build that. It's a bit of a time process. If this can be just a turnkey solution, you tell it what you want and then you can add the logo and like make it like a really good brand experience. Like we're very excited about that. And I think one thing as well with Snap that we've really leaned into is actually ChatGPT. So if you guys have Snapchat, and I hope you all do, if you go, the very first person on your Snap now is going to be called your My AI, but this is basically having ChatGPT at your fingertips at all time, where you can go in, ask it any questions, ask it to write you a poem, ask it to do anything ChatGPT does. But what's amazing about that is like there's so much signal now being sent to us through like these keywords, you know, platforms like Snap and Meta and everybody kind of personalize users based on what we think, based on what the, you know, AI thinks they are. But if somebody's actually talking to the AI and saying, hey, I like this, where can I get a coffee nearby? Just things like that. Like we can just be so much more contextual and just deliver just much better experiences for users. So yeah, that's kind of like where we're really excited about, and hopefully just more involvement will happen with that over the next while.
Jess, from the client perspective, given the minefield of everything going on and even the insights we just heard from the panel here, how do you navigate that? How do you look at this category, this topic from the brand side?
Yeah, I would say, you know, very eager for AI to help make the creative process more efficient. I don't know about other brands, but I feel like my creative team is always at max capacity, so we could use the efficiency for sure. But I think it will be, at least in the foreseeable future, most brand managers would be very wary of letting AI stuff run on its own, right? Like you talked about brand safety, Brendan, and it's definitely top of mind. We definitely need somebody, even if it's writing post copy, somebody to refine it and tweak it and make it a little better, even if it's a ChatGPT generated piece of copy, right? So I'm excited that it's here, but I don't think that it's going to fully replace a human creative, at least in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, one more state goes legal, everything has to change.
Exactly.
Yeah, and especially in a budding industry like ours, where responsible gaming is so important, and we have to have the industry leaders really building creative and advertising right. Like we need like 3 parties to check that creative before it goes out. You know.
Yeah, highly regulated. Makes sense. I mean, I don't know if others have seen, and you were alluding to what we're calling AI sandbox, where you can do this, text copy generation or, kind of editing and cutting creative assets in the background images to fit various placements. So that's one less thing for a creative editor to have to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's not replacing. It's helping make more efficient, hopefully. But obviously, RMG has a lot of hoops we have to jump through first on the compliance side. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big opportunity for me, it's not. Well, I don't think it's going to create the big idea. It's not going to come up with the winner chicken dinner campaign. But what it can do, if you need to do 500 variations of that ad, rather than paying your expensive, creative team to do it manually and make these different adjustments, maybe that can be automated in an efficient way, and then just kind of reviewed and QA'd and signed off.
Yeah, and we're starting to, I'm sure on the Snap side as well, like if you guys are in Ads Manager, you'll see this, like we're already natively feeding people into our Advantage Plus suite of kind of building and buying, campaigns, which leverages all of our AI power on the back end, and it kind of simplifies the ad creation process and hopefully puts time back into the day of the media buyers.
One of the interesting things I was taking from a lot of your answers about that relationship between creative and media, and this is one of the classic advertising marketing questions, but given where we are with the technology as of now and where we're heading, how can media and creative teams best work together? And maybe Joe, you could kick that one off.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's probably one that most brands struggle with, because they always typically are kind of art and science, separate sides of the brain. But I think, again, the best marketers or marketing orgs kind of do a really good job of making sure they're aligned and working closely together. And a lot of times what we've seen is those orgs actually have someone kind of bridging the fence, so marketing, creative strategy, so they actually roll up and are accountable to both creative and marketing leadership, and there's kind of joint goals. And that's the other thing, is making sure kind of goals and KPIs and measures of success are aligned with what creatives are kind of, asked to do, and how then the marketing team is going to deploy and execute that. Because if those things are misaligned, there's a lot of problems internally. So I think including the marketing and media buying team, or at least leadership, and maybe having some kind of marketing liaison to creative very early on in that ideation and creative brief process will only have kind of positive downstream effects.
100% agree there. I'm a big advocate of bringing our internal media partners closer and more upstream in the creative process. Like, once we lock that idea, like, no other creative maybe needs to be developed, but I want them to know what the idea is. And I think this time around, when we're planning our Q4 campaign, which will launch at the end of this month, we push to do that, and we are getting in a much better place in terms of the type of innovative ad placements that can really speak to the creative idea that we're pushing out. So further up in the collaboration process is really, really key.
I mean, when I joined Sportradar, I was kind of given a fairly blank sheet of paper. I was like, what does the ideal solution for the industry look like? And one of the things I was really keen on was to make sure that we offered a solution across media and creative, and that we kind of broke down those silos and those barriers. And I think selfishly, working with advertisers, I do want to make sure that as a media buyer, that the media influence is felt as high up the chain and as early in the process as possible. I think the collaboration with FanJoy Casino has been fantastic, and I think is continuing to go to improve. I guess being realistic, that's not always going to be the case, right? Some brands and there's a lot of complex kind of orgs to manage and egos to manage as well. But I think at the very minimum, we need to have that kind of feedback loop, so at least the creative teams know where the media is going to run, how it's performing. It may not change that campaign, but it may influence, future campaigns and iterations.
Yeah, I think as well for Snap, like, the platform is like such a creative platform. It's like a blank canvas of like what you want to build with like our different ad units. And like what we've really seen work well with like the category is like, we work with very senior people on creative side, but it's just like one junior creative decides, hey, I want to make Snapchat amazing and make it work. And we've seen that happen with several different like operators, where one person was like, I'm just going to decide and just stay and like make Snap really good. And now these guys are running their own teams that's like dedicated to Snap. So I think it's like, start thinking about each platform really individually and like immersing yourself as much as possible, because like I feel that's also a great opportunity for somebody who's like looking to bud and grow in this industry and the creative to really just like hone in and like prove that value and help that platform rise to the top of like an acquisition channel.
Brilliant.
Yeah, well, and just quickly to add on to that too, something we talk a lot about internally and with our partners is essentially creative is the new targeting, right? Especially as we're going to leverage AI and a lot of these like automation powered campaign buying and optimization tools. There's less you can do as a buyer to kind of add in the specific segmentation and bid strategies like you were talking about earlier. So I made a comment earlier about having a good mix and portfolio of creatives. And when you put that into the system and let the AI kind of work its magic, different types of creatives optimized for different platforms and different placements specifically are going to deliver to the right person at the right time. So let the creative kind of work for you, and creative is the new targeting. Is something we talk a lot about with our partners.
And just on that theme of creative, I think that's a lovely segue into brand. And I just want to focus a little bit, just a quick question around brand in regards to when developing social media strategies, how do you balance your brand and key messages while still driving mainstream adoption and ultimately education on sports betting? And Jess, would you mind kicking that one off?
I think that question very perfectly summarizes the challenge of any creative brief in this category, right? We want to talk about what online casino or sports betting is. A lot of people may not be aware, especially online casino. And we also need to talk about the promotions and explain them in a clear way. But at the same time, the ad and content needs to be engaging, or no one's going to make it through all the way to the promotions, So it's definitely a tough needle to thread. And I think what I tell my team to always remember is why our brand exists, why people come to FanDuel FanDuel Casino. It's for entertainment and it's for fun, right? So any piece of content we put out into the world needs to feel like what people feel when they stand into a land-based casino. The lights, the sounds, and the thrill and anticipation of winning, right? And we also talk a lot in our teams about how the brand isn't just something we slap in a big splashy TV ad. Every touch point where we talk about our brand and communicate with the customer needs to live and breathe the brand. I don't think we're quite there yet today. I think we're getting better and better. You know, we did just relaunch our brand identity about a year ago, so this is year one. And year two, we're going to continue to get better at, again, bringing that fun of casino to life in every interaction we have with customers.
And just on that point around brand, do you think there's any learnings from other markets or other industries when it comes to social and sports betting and gaming? And maybe Brendan, that's something that you could talk about.
Yeah. I mean, firstly, the industry does a lot well, so before we shit on them, I mean, it's particularly in the US market, I kind of often describe like the UK as like the ghost of Christmas future, right? It's like they've gone through a lot of pain in the last, 5, 6, 7 years. And I think as much as there are differences between US and UK, and I don't want to be another European coming over and telling the US industry how they should do everything, there are hard,
But I'll do it anyway.
there are hard lessons there, because if you wind the clock back, when I would have been actively working with some of the bigger European bookmakers, a lot of them were just super focused on the lower funnel, bet now, here's 10 quid, get 40 quid back. And that still happens today, but we saw this shift big into brand advertising and big into the entertainment factor of betting and the social aspect of betting. So William Hill have an ad with Sweet Caroline and people going to a football game. And it's like an alcohol ad in a way, right? In a good way. It's not just bet now, super lower funnel. And so I like that the US industry gets there before the regulators kind of mandate it, right? Get ahead of potentially what's coming down the track. That's probably the biggest learning I'd like to learn in the US. Yeah.
I think something that we were talking about earlier too. On top of that, I guess, less. And you hear, FanDuel, DraftKings, BetMGM, they all talk about kind of less intensity of promotional offers, just because that attracts such negative kind of PR. So the flip side of that is, we were talking earlier, it's the need to kind of include PR and marketing and comms teams, in this overall process and building kind of a strong narrative and coalition across the industry, across operators of like, we're doing this responsibly, we're teaching and, launching editorials, right, about the risks associated with it. Responsible gaming will be a big investment area, I think, for all operators moving forward. But including PR and comms in that process will just kind of help build that narrative and get out in front of it proactively rather than waiting until it's too late.
Yeah, I think that comment on PR integration is so key. We have a great PR team over at FanDuel, and like one of the key things they always say is like, don't come to us because there's something wrong. Yeah. Come to us proactively with your plans and we can make it better and get the good news out there and get ahead of a lot of things. And I think just going back to your question on, learnings from other industries, you probably can resonate with this too, but beer, heavily regulated industry. Healthcare, where I also spent some time, also heavily regulated. I think beer, you touched on, in the U.S. has done such a good job of building a proposition on moderation. So responsible drinking has really been quite a success. You can buy beer in all 50 states, right? And beer is a much more mature category. So to Brendan's point, the advertising leans much more lifestyle, emotional differentiation, and you get to some pretty exciting work and some pretty loyal fans because of that emotional differentiation, right? So I think all those things are things that I hope our industry can learn from and get there eventually. It'll take time, with responsible gaming, but it really takes industry leaders, advertising the right way, being thoughtful, getting ahead of policymakers and keeping them in the loop, all those things, and it takes time, right? Industry leaders prioritizing all these things. And I hope in the next couple of years our advertising can get to that kind of emotional differentiation between brands, where we're not just talking about promotions and who has like the best, most cost-efficient promotion or whatever it is. We can get to some pretty exciting areas with brand.
Yeah, I think the good thing about like on the platform side of like how we've worked with like you guys at FanDuel, DraftKings, BetMGM, it's like you guys put these requests on us of like how to be compliant and like how to make sure that like, we're following the best practices for the industry, just as sustainable as possible, so we don't go down the path of like what has happened in like some of the European countries. So like, you know, we have opt-in, opt-out of that. If you want to be exposed to this messaging, it's the same on Meta, YouTube, everywhere now. So like, you know, I think we're very serious across the board about this, and you never really kind of want to go down that path where like it's kind of just, you know, causing issues.
But let's finish up there. Thank you, everyone.